Welcome to TAVA Talks,
where there's real teens, real voices, and real change. And
we are your hosts, Lulu Roman
and Deanna Lynch.
Today we are here with Dr. Gestring.
My name is Mark Gestring. I'm a surgeon at the University of Rochester.
The topic we are going to talk about today is Stop the Bleed and gun violence among the youth.
Okay. Our first question we would like to ask you is, what made you want to start this gun violence campaign?
So I'm a trauma surgeon here. I've been involved in trauma care in the city of Rochester for over 20 years, and we've seen a lot of kind of repeat type patterns, just things happening over and over and over again. And the more you see them, the more you think, oh, it doesn't have to happen. With a little bit of education, you can probably teach people how to avoid dying from violence. So the couple of different things you mentioned, a bunch all in one thing, but to try and prevent people from doing things that are going to get them killed, number one. And if they do get shot, then Stop the Bleed kicks in. Right? Stop the Bleed's not a great prevention thing, right? If you're already bleeding, but there's a skill set to, if somebody is injured, to try and help until they can get to the hospital. But a lot of what we've been doing has been focused on violence. Call it intervention more than prevention. So kids who are at risk for violence, we try to teach them about the ways that they're putting themselves at risk and that kind of stuff, and try to help get in front of some of that stuff if we can.
Okay, so our follow-up question is, what inspired you to contribute to stop the gun violence?
So it's something I've been passionate about doing this for a long, long time. Much of what trauma surgeons do is look at ways to prevent the kind of injuries we take care of. So, in the city, we take care of gunshots. We try and see what we can do about preventing gunshots, but it's no different. Whether it's bicycle injuries, we try to teach kids how to wear helmets and not to ride in the street, and not to ride without lights at night, that kind of stuff. So our program is very active in injury prevention. So we talk about not just violence, but we prevent, do fall prevention. We do, pedestrian safety kinds of things. We do a lot of different specific things related to the way people get injured. One example would be like hunters. Like right around now, we're recording this in the fall, right? So that's when hunting season starts, and people injure themselves in certain ways when they're hunting. So we try to provide education to kind of keep people safe while they're doing that stuff, whether it's falling out of tree stands or accidentally discharging a firearm or something like that. We try and work on those kinds of things. But during the year, like around Halloween, we talk about safe, pedestrian stuff, wear reflectors when you're crossing the street, that kind of stuff, so people can see you, those kinds of things. And it alternates based on when we are in the year. But the violence stuff has been pretty much a year-round problem, as you guys know, in the city, right?
Yeah.
So trying to get people to understand what the true price of that is, and trying to get people to the best that they can prevent being in those kind of situations. You always ask, like, when a 16-year-old kid is injured at 4 a.m, what are they doing out at 4 a.m?
Right.
Like nothing good happens at 4 a.m. So it might not be at fault. You might not have done anything wrong necessarily, but you're putting yourself at risk to be, in those kind of situations at that time. And those are the kinds of things that's one example of the kinds of things we're trying to teach people about.
So there's a hashtag called Not an Accident. There was at least 305 unintentional deaths by children this year in counting from firearms in the U.S. What can we do to prevent that from ever happening in the first place?
So when we look at firearm injury, there's 3 ways people get hurt with a gun, right? So there's intentional violence. So that's when, somebody commits a crime or attacks you or something with a gun. That's intentional violence. The next way is through suicide, right? So somebody takes their own gun and hurts themselves with their own gun. And the third way, which I think what you're asking about, is like the accidental stuff, right? So that's kids getting a hold of guns that are not secure, things of that nature, right? Because that's when you're talking about young kids.
Yes.
Like, those are generally mostly not violent events. Those are more related to careless gun ownership. So we definitely have a program here that we probably the first in the country like it, where we're focusing on kind of teaching responsible gun ownership to people who have guns legally, teaching them how not to leave them laying around, how to make sure they're locked up, making sure that kids in your house can't get access to it, right? 'Cause I think that's kind of what you're asking me, right? When a 6-year-old picks up a gun and shoots another 6-year-old by accident, why did that 6-year-old have access to a weapon? That's definitely not how these things are supposed to work. There's a bunch of things related to legal or responsible gun ownership that are related to your question. That really you might have a right to own a gun, but you also have the responsibility to make sure it's safe, and that's to keep it away from people like kids, right? So yeah, it's not an accident when something like that happens. Those things are never accidents, and much of that you can address with education.
You work in the ER?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
yeah. So we work in the emergency room. We also work in the operating room and in the ICUs. So the trauma surgeons, we meet people when they first come into the hospital, and then we follow them through their course until they get better and go home.
We just got the shadow in the ER.
Oh, good. Oh, did you? Was it busy?
No, not
Which is
really.
good, actually,
Yeah.
because not much people are getting hurt.
Well, it varies, right? So our business is a 24/7 kind of thing. So we did have, I think 2 nights ago we had like 3 gunshot wounds that came in, and the night before that there were 3 also that came in. So the fact that there weren't any when you came in was good,
Yeah.
but still. We look at this thing called the Rochester Police Open Data Portal. I don't know if you've ever looked at that. It's publicly available. You can go online and just type in Open Data Portal Rochester, and it tells you how many people got shot, how many people got murdered, day by day by day. So a month ago, I did it, and we're up to like 230 gunshots, and I think 40 murders, 36 murders, something like that. But I can look that up and tell you exactly. You can look it up and
Yeah.
know exactly how many people got shot. And the overwhelming majority of those people are coming here. Not every last one, but most of them end up coming here.
Wow. That's a lot.
Too many for a small city like Rochester. Way too many. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So that goes into our next question. Can you give us an example of a severe case you had related to gun violence? So like a really bad experience.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, I can give you way too many. But like I said, this happens on a pretty regular basis here. But so I think probably the best way to answer your question is to say that there are a couple of different outcomes when you get shot, right? So everybody sees in the movies, you get shot, you get killed, it's over, done. Everybody's sad, move on, right? But that's not always the case, right? So sometimes you get shot and you don't get injured at all, just a flesh wound. Those are kind of super dangerous because now you think nobody can kill you, and you get yourself into more trouble because you think, I got shot once, it didn't hurt, I can do it again. That's definitely the wrong idea, right? But then there's that whole in-between part where somebody gets shot, they need multiple operations, they're paralyzed, they lose a limb, that kind of stuff. And it's not uncommon that we see people who are in the hospital for a week, sometimes months, and they leave with colostomy bags, missing an extremity, stuff like that. But, on the news, you don't hear they're dead. They just were seriously injured, and that's the last you hear about it. But that impact of that on people's lives, these are mostly young people, right? Mm-hmm. So you're a young person, now suddenly your life has changed. Your family's life has changed. Somebody has to take care of you. Somebody has to take care of the wounds. You have multiple surgeries. You're asking me about a specific case, and maybe I'm not so great at giving you a specific example, but in general, that story plays out often enough where you can almost predict what's going to happen. These are going to be devastating injuries. They're going to be, very, very time-consuming to fix. It's going to take somebody months and months to heal, if they can heal everything altogether. You'll remember this episode, so it's very random. I mean, if I point a gun at you and pull the trigger, depends on how good my aim is and how fast you move, right, in terms of what I hit, right? And if I hit, through the spinal cord, you're paralyzed for the rest of your life. And if I'm off by a quarter inch, maybe it just gets the flesh of your neck and you're fine, right? But it's not a game you should be playing. It's definitely not something that people want to get involved in. And like I said, we see innocent people getting shot too, but there's once the bullet flies, it doesn't matter. It's gonna hit something or somebody. We've seen bullets go through houses. We haven't seen, thankfully, a lot of people inside those houses getting hit, but people are shooting at houses or accidentally shooting at houses, and the people inside the house are minding their own business. Bullet comes through the wall and potentially injures them. We've seen people get shot in cars. They're driving along the street and suddenly somebody shoots at the car and it goes through the car window and hits them.
Innocent people are dying from this.
Absolutely.
That have nothing to do with what's going on, and they're dying.
Absolutely. And they're certainly getting injured, and some of them are dying, for sure. Yeah, for sure. And kids are growing up with that every single day. I mean, I think that's kind of the bigger challenge is, kids growing up in these neighborhoods, they're not really getting to see what life could be like without that kind of, almost like you're living in a war zone. It doesn't have to be like that.
Does it affect their mental, right?
Well, you got to believe that, if you don't feel safe, I mean, it's like the most important thing you want to do growing up is feel safe, right? You want to know that you can walk to the store, you can walk to school, you can go to the park, you can do those kinds of things. And in these neighborhoods, it's not safe to do many of those things, right? So see that actually, we do a lot of work going into different neighborhoods, trying to talk about violence and stuff, and we do, we go to these kind of parks and we do these kind of community things. Have you guys visited us doing one of those? Over the summer, we did a bunch of those.
We went to Rock the Peace.
So that's a similar thing. So we do a lot with something called Project TIPS, which is Trust Information Programs and Services. We go into neighborhoods and we do those kinds of projects as well. But, but many times, even before we can do the event, they have to clean up all the needles, like the drug needles in the park and stuff, so people don't get hurt. So there's a lot of problems in some of these neighborhoods, and hopefully, people will start pushing back a little bit to say this is not right, this is not normal, because people are trying to raise families in these neighborhoods. They don't want to be part of these gang wars and all this other stuff that goes on. So,
what can we do when there's a situation going on, like it's ongoing, it's happening in the moment?
well, I think probably the best thing to do is to get away from it, right? So, you don't have to. There's no time to be brave, no time to stand up and fight. Just get the heck away. If you think there's a situation brewing, you think two people are about to start fighting or about to start shooting at each other, just be somewhere else. That's probably the most. Take your friends, take your family, and just say, we can't be here. We got to go away, and just get away from there. I mean, if you think something's escalating, I think calling the police probably makes some sense. But I know there's differing opinions about that, which I think is a little bit crazy. But at the same time, I think probably the best advice I can give you is to be elsewhere when that starts happening, because we see innocent people getting shot, like in these party type situations, and when somebody goes crazy and starts shooting at a bar or something like that, and get other people who are not involved end up getting injured that way.
Plus, if somebody was like bleeding out from a gun wound, what if they don't know to stop the bleed?
Well, so that's now you're switching gears a little bit. So let's say you do get injured. So Stop the Bleed teaches some basic life skills. So it's just like CPR. You guys know what CPR is, right?
Yeah.
It's just like the Heimlich maneuver, which is for choking. You guys know what that is too, right? Somebody's choking, and you get behind them and you kind of help dislodge you've seen that, right?
Yes.
So this is no different. So this is a skill set that the average citizen can have. It's very easy to obtain. You guys did the training. It's very easy to understand how to do this. You don't need to be a doctor. And if you come across somebody who's bleeding, so you're asking me in the context of violence, people get shot and stabbed, they certainly could use this skill set. But in a home accident, you fall off a swing, you hit a rusty nail or something like that, people can definitely, with a chainsaw, on a motorcycle, there's a lot of other ways you can get injured. And it's a basic skill set that teaches you how to control that bleeding until real help arrives. So if you remember, the first thing we teach people to do is to hold direct pressure, right, on something that's bleeding. And, if you can't because the wound is too big, then to pack the wound with something, ideally a bandage if you can get one. But if not, then a shirt or something, like any kind of material, you can pack the wound. And then if you have access to a tourniquet and it's on an extremity, you can use a tourniquet, right? You guys learned how to do that.
Yes.
What's important to mention is that the equipment necessary for Stop the Bleed is more and more in the public now. So I don't know if you start looking, like when you're at Wegmans or out at the airport or something like that, when you see the cardiac defibrillators hanging on the wall, like the AEDs, more and more of them now have bleeding control kits there also. So it makes no sense to have the skill set if you can't have access to any equipment. Like we can teach people CPR, but CPR with an AED is much better, right? So it's the same thing. So Stop the Bleed, you can do it without any equipment at all, but if you have access to a tourniquet, it's much better. If you carry a tourniquet, that's great, but many people don't, right? So you want to know where to